Hello. Today we are going to be painting the street scene, as you can see in this photograph, of Pezenas, I believe it's pronounced. Um, we're going to try to replicate what we would be doing if we were outside. So as you can see, I already put a wash of what looks like burnt umber and I think it was burnt sienna, little yellow ochre. I'm adding a touch of green in there because I see some green window treatments there, some shutters. So what I'm trying to do here is just kind of kill the white, get rid of all the white. I'm using very, very thin paint. As you can see, it's not thick at all. It's going to dry as watercolor does, about 10 to 15% lighter than it appears in the wet stage. So consider that. Also, when we're working outside, any temperature over 70 degrees, even 65 degrees, depending if you're in the sun, your paint is going to dry very quickly. So you may want to hold on to a little atomizer, spray bottle. Try to find one that does give like a finer mist. You can constantly spray that over your working image or your painting as you're working, just to keep the colors blending and workable. All right, so as you can see, I put a little purple, like a dirty purple on the pavement on the bottom. I put some accents just on the base of the street where you can see the shadows and those little lines on the right side, the squiggly line there is just really to anchor that lower area. And that building right now that I'm painting here, I did put a slightly darker wash there because I want that contrast between that building and the light building to the left, where it sort of kind of curves in. So the reason for that is that's going to be that's the effect area, right? We want to try, that's what we're trying to capture in the picture. Also, we're trying to capture the day, the festivities going on, people walking through the alleyway, looking, probably walking into some shops along the way. And also in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that there's some dresses, and I'm going to be painting them quite bright. In painting composition, sometimes you do want to have like an area where, let's say, the majority of the painting, well, for the most part, isn't all that colorful, right? We have these buildings that are kind of grayish, brownish, drab. They're not like super colorful. Sometimes it's good, instead of having like everything in the same color or many different colors, it's always good to have like one little splash of color. And you'll see that happening as soon as I start painting in those areas. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to ascertain some perspective, or at least allude to perspective. There are no strong perspective lines. I'm just going by visual perspective. Here are those bright red dresses that I see in the sunshine. We want to have those nice colors, bursting on that lower right-hand corner. Uh, some detail coming in. These are separations possibly of the buildings. They can be drain pipes. They can be pretty much anything. So they are what they are. And you want to try to get a few of them because we do want to show some detail. And when I say show, I mean imply. You don't want it, it's more of like, in this style of painting, it's more of like we're implying, we're not illustrating. All right, so I'm throwing in some burnt sienna and burnt umber because I want a nice, a deeper wash, especially right there in the foreground. You want to get that feeling that those buildings are um, gradating from dark for the far left side to a slightly lighter side, again, to bring our eye into the center of the picture, right where those people are walking. They're not necessarily the focal point, but they're a point of interest, and we want to have them in there. And we want to have the sunlight hitting them nice and bright as they are, and you'll see that happening later on. Now, there is a grid system. I had drawn this just freehand, but I'll see if I can. I'm going to look into that, and I'm going to see if I can do a quick video on just how that's used. In the old days, we used to just draw a grid on acetate paper and then put a grid on our canvas or whatever we were painting on. But we'll talk about that later. I want to get more into the painting now. Now, as you can see, the sky in the reference shot is very cerulean, and you could use a darker cerulean if you want to. Nothing wrong with that. I prefer to keep the skies a little on the lighter side because my watercolor is going to pick up more light. It's going to be a slightly higher key than the photograph because I want to try to get as much light effect as possible without going too dark. So that's why you also excuse me, you have to understand that sometimes when we paint a sky, we have to be very careful not to paint it too dark, because whenever you paint the sky in a landscape, what you're doing in essence is you're keying the rest of the painting in, because if your sky is too dark, everything has to be dark in relationship to the, well, basically the light source, right? Even though that's not the sunlight, it still represents, you know, the lighter sky. So be aware of that situation. Try not to, even if the sky does look like that dark or that colorful, always go a little lighter on the sky. That's just a general rule of thumb that I follow. If a sky, depending on the time of day, if it's sunset or if it's a nocturne scene, which I don't do a lot of, but if there are, yeah, I will make the sky as dark as it needs to be without being too dark. All right, so now more implied detail, right? As you can see, those little marks and scratches and so forth, very quick. Now, yes, they're quick because, or at least they look like they're quick because this video is sped up a quarter time. So, but when I go to paint these lines, I want to make sure that my lines are thick and thin, that they're done quickly, okay? We can't have any ruled lines because the one ruled line will throw us all off. That would mean if we saw one straight, perfect line, and then we'd be like, well, how come all these other lines are wobbly and broken? Well, we want to try to give that sensation of a quick implied line, an impressionistic type line. We don't want it to do any detail. If you guys want to get into detail, what I would do is try to do a really good color study like we're doing here. You know, take your time, try to get the right colors. And then just before you start your painting, always before you start the painting, so if we rewind back to the beginning, I would always take a picture just before I start putting paint on. Another reason for that is that when we start to paint, outdoors, that is, our painting is going, or I should say the light source is going to shift within an hour. So where the sun was in, you know, an hour before, it's going to shift. So your shadows can be longer or shorter depending on the the movement of the sun. Okay, so be aware of that when you're painting. Okay, and all the stuff that I'm talking about now, I'll be going over with you guys on the trip. So I just wanted to do these little demonstrations so I wouldn't be cutting into your time when we're painting there, actually on scene. Also, there's going to be, for you oil painters, there's going to be a couple of oil videos too. I might do one more watercolor. In fact, there's a nice water scene I'd like to do, and it's also going to be small, and but it's going, you know, sometimes these little paintings are charming because you know, you don't have to worry about a larger full sheet or half sheet and transferring that. This can stick right into a magazine almost, and you can keep it safe on the trip back. All right, so getting back to that little hot spot right there. Right now, I'm just basically using like a little number 4 brush to get, see those lines I didn't quite like, so I just use my finger and tap them out a little bit, right? I want to get some indication of those, what looked like, I would say, is probably cobblestone maybe, or just to get an indication of them. All right, so as we can see, we have a lot of light right on those dresses in the foreground on that lower right-hand corner. Here, there's what looks like a little bench or something there. More detail, more color added. Not too crazy about like doing any detail, showing sleeves, showing any kind of detail in those dresses. We kind of know that they're, it's outside, it's a street situation. There's stores, of course. We're going to know that they're goods to be sold. Now the people. So what I'm doing here now, there is a very faint drawing back there, and I did that so that they would be scaled properly. We don't want the people to look like they're too big or too small where they are in that midground. So I started to add a bit of, just a little wash. There's a person a little further back who might be a little bit taller. Another rule of thumb too is when you're drawing people in a line, try to keep their heads close to the same eye level, so that even the person who's a little further, like the person wearing, if we look at the photograph, we see the woman or whoever that is, that figure, is a little bit closer to us, right? They're not as far back as the people on the right. So, but their heads are close in height. So try to keep that in mind when you're drawing. That it kind of lends, her head's a little higher, but I don't think I painted that high. I think I painted a little smaller. But here I'm just putting in the legs, just trying to get some gesture. That's pretty much it. Now I noticed too, like my backdrop there needs to be a little bit softer and a little darker because I'm about to put some highlights on the people's heads. If you can look at the photograph now, we can see that they're top lit, okay, again indicating that it's noonday. The light seems to be from the very top. You can also see by the shortness of the shadows under them. So here we go. So they're so right in there, there's some people. So the hair, I'm just plotting in some of the hair, and that's pretty much it. I think there's a little bit more detail in here, but for the most part, I don't think I did all that much more to this. And I think as we go, in a minute, yep, we're going to see the final. There it is. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you there. Bye for now.